My name is Margaret Lawson. I'm 60 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will forever change the way you see your own family. Just 3 days ago, my own son Lucas and my daughter-in-law Ava pushed my husband William and me off a 90-foot cliff. As I lay there broken and bleeding, I heard my husband's desperate whisper, "Margaret, don't move. Play dead." But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was when William revealed the most terrible truth a mother could ever hear. A secret our children had kept for 25 years. For 4 decades, William and I built what we thought was the perfect family. We woke up every morning in our cozy suburban home, where the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sound of birds singing. I worked as a teacher at the local elementary school, coming home every afternoon with stories of my young students. William had his carpentry shop where he created the most beautiful furniture you could ever imagine. His hands, rough yet delicate, could transform a simple piece of wood into a work of art. We had 2 children, James, our firstborn, and Lucas, 5 years younger. James was the soul of the house, always laughing, always helping William in the shop, always shielding me from any worries. Lucas was different, more reserved, but I loved him with the same intensity. As a mother, you never play favorites, or at least that's what I thought. On Sundays after church, the whole family would gather around our oak table, which William had carved with his own hands. James would tell us his plans to study engineering, while Lucas would remain silent, just picking at his food. Life was simple but beautiful. In the evenings, William and I would walk the trail around our small town, talking about our dreams, how we'd watch our grandchildren grow, and how we'd grow old together in that very house. I never imagined those walks would prepare me for the one that almost killed me. On weekends, I'd host family gatherings where my sisters, Clara and Rachel, would come with their husbands and children. The house would fill with laughter, kids running everywhere, women sharing recipes in the kitchen while the men fixed something in the yard. William was my perfect partner after 40 years of marriage. He still brought me wildflowers he'd pick on the way to work. He helped me grade my students' tests, and I would hold pieces of wood for him while he cut them in his workshop. We were a team, an unbreakable unit, or so I thought. At night, we'd sit on the porch to watch the stars, planning our future. We talked about traveling when we retired, seeing the ocean for the first time, building a smaller house once our children started their own families. But perfect happiness, as I would later discover, often hides the deepest tragedies. When James turned 20, something began to change in our family. He started to argue with Lucas about things I didn't understand. I'd hear them whispering in the hallway, and they'd fall silent when I appeared. William told me it was just brotherly stuff and that it would pass. I wanted to believe him because I needed to believe our family was still perfect. One night in October, exactly 25 years ago, James didn't come home for dinner. We waited until 11, then 12, then 1 in the morning. Lucas was in his room, supposedly studying, but I noticed something strange in his eyes whenever I asked about his brother. William went out to search for him with our neighbors. They checked every corner of town, every trail, every place James used to go. At dawn, they found his body at the bottom of the river gorge. The police said it was an accident, that he had probably stumbled in the dark. I never questioned that version because I couldn't imagine that the truth was much more horrible. James's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore my only black dress, the same one I'd worn at my mother's funeral. Lucas was strangely calm for someone who had just lost his older brother. While I cried until I had no tears left, he remained silent with an expression that now, after what I know, sends shivers down my spine. William never left my side all day, holding me up when my legs gave out, whispering words of comfort that I now know tasted bitter in his mouth. After James's death, Lucas changed completely. He became more attentive, more loving, as if he were trying to make up for something. He helped me with chores, accompanied his father to the workshop, and brought me things when he saw I was sad. I thought it was his way of dealing with grief, of filling the void James had left behind. How naive I was. What he was really doing was building a perfect mask to hide the monster inside. The years passed and the wound never fully healed. But we learned to live with it. Lucas married Ava, a sweet girl from the next town over, and they seemed happy. My name is Margaret Lawson, and what I'm about to share with you will forever alter the way you view your own family. Lucas, my son, and Ava, my daughter-in-law, pushed William and me off a 90-foot cliff just 3 days ago. As I lay there, broken and battered, I heard my husband's strained whisper, "Margaret, don't move. Play dead." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst came when William revealed the most agonizing truth a mother could ever hear. A secret our children had been hiding for 25 years. For decades, William and I had worked hard to build what we thought was the perfect family. Every morning, we woke up in our little suburban home, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixing with the sound of birds singing outside. I taught at the local elementary school, spending my afternoons recounting stories from my classroom. William worked as a carpenter, making beautiful, intricate furniture with his hands, turning simple pieces of wood into art. We had 2 children, James, our firstborn, and Lucas, 5 years younger. James was the light of our family, always laughing, always helping his father in the workshop, always there to protect me. Lucas, on the other hand, was more reserved, quieter, but I loved him with the same intensity. As a mother, you never think you'll play favorites, or at least, that's what I believed. After church on Sundays, the family would gather around our oak dining table, hand-carved by William. James would excitedly share his plans to study engineering, while Lucas would sit quietly, picking at his food. Life was simple yet beautiful. Evenings were spent walking around our town, dreaming of the future, imagining watching our grandchildren grow up in the house we built with our own hands. I never imagined those walks were training for the one that almost killed me. On weekends, I hosted family gatherings, where Clara and Rachel, my sisters, would bring their families. The house would be alive with laughter, kids running about, women swapping recipes in the kitchen while the men tinkered in the yard. William was my perfect partner. After 40 years of marriage, he still picked wildflowers for me on his way to work. He helped me grade my students' papers, and I would hold pieces of wood while he worked in his shop. We were a team, an unbreakable unit, or so I thought. At night, we'd sit on the porch and plan our future, excited for the years ahead. We talked about traveling when we retired, seeing the ocean for the first time, and downsizing when our children had families of their own. But as I would later learn, perfect happiness often hides the deepest tragedies. When James turned 20, something changed in our family. He started arguing with Lucas about things I didn't fully understand. I'd hear them whispering in the hallway, and they'd fall silent when I walked into the room. William reassured me it was just typical brotherly conflict, something that would pass. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe my family was still perfect. One cold night in October, exactly 25 years ago, James didn't come home for dinner. We waited until 11, then 12, then 1 a.m. Lucas was in his room, supposedly studying, but something was off in his demeanor whenever I asked about his brother. William went out searching with our neighbors. They searched every part of the town, every trail, every spot James had frequented. At dawn, they found his body at the bottom of a river gorge. The police labeled it an accident, saying he must have stumbled in the dark. I never questioned it, until now. James's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore my only black dress, the same one I'd worn for my mother's funeral. Lucas was unnervingly calm. While I cried myself raw, he remained eerily silent. William never left my side, holding me up when I could barely stand, offering comfort that I now know was tinged with bitterness. After James's death, Lucas became a different person. He grew more attentive, more loving, as if trying to make up for something. I thought it was his way of grieving, of trying to fill the void James had left behind. How naive I was. What he was truly doing was building a facade, hiding the monster beneath. The years passed, and the wound, though never fully healed, became a part of our everyday lives. Lucas married Ava, a sweet girl from the next town, and they seemed happy. They had 2 beautiful children, and for a moment, I felt like life was giving us a second chance at happiness. Ava called me Mom and helped me with the housework when they visited. Lucas had inherited his father's carpentry skills and ran his own business. Everything appeared perfect again. But now, lying at the bottom of this gorge with broken ribs and the taste of blood in my mouth, I realized that all that happiness was nothing but a carefully constructed lie. The first signs that something was wrong began 6 months ago when William and I decided to update our will. We had saved our entire lives. Between the house, the land I inherited from my parents, and our bank savings, we had nearly $200,000 to leave to our children and grandchildren. It was Lucas who suggested we visit a lawyer. Mom, Dad, you're both 60 now. It's important to have everything in order, he said, flashing a smile that now seemed sinister. Ava nodded beside him, stroking my hand with those fingers that would later push me to my death. We love you so much, and we want to make sure you're protected, she added, her voice sweet, though now it feels like a lie. How foolish I was to interpret those words as genuine love. Things escalated when Lucas suggested we give him power of attorney over our finances. It's just a precaution, he explained while Ava prepared tea in our kitchen, acting as if she were the one running the house. If either of you gets sick or has a health issue, we can manage your affairs without legal complications. The way he said it, so naturally, so logically, almost convinced me. But there was something about his insistence that made me uneasy. I couldn't sleep that night. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, listening to William's steady breathing beside me, trying to understand why I felt so disturbed. The next morning, I called my sister Clara for advice. She had always been sharper than me, more skeptical of people's intentions. When I told her about Lucas's pressure, she was silent for a long time. "Margaret," she finally said, "doesn't it seem strange to you that Lucas is so eager to control your money? I mean, he has his own business. He's doing well financially. Why would he need so much control over your finances?" Her words hit me like a slap. She was right. Lucas had never seemed to have financial troubles, never borrowed money, never showed signs of needing our financial help. That afternoon, when Lucas came over for another one of his talks about our future, I decided to confront him directly. "Son," I said as we sat in the living room, "why is it so important for you to have control over our financial affairs? William and I are still in our right minds." His reaction was immediate and telling. His face hardened, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of someone else. Something cold, calculating, and dangerous. "Mom, it's not about control," he responded in a tense voice. "It's about love, care, and family responsibility." But the way he said family responsibility sounded more like a threat than an expression of affection. Ava, who had been silent until then, intervened with her sweet but firm voice. "Margaret," she said, "we just want what's best for you. It's painful to see you worry about things we could easily handle." That night, after they left, William and I had our first serious argument in years. He thought I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where there were none. But I insisted something wasn't right, that Lucas's behavior had changed too much. "William," I said as we washed the dishes, "do you remember what Lucas was like before James died? He was different, more distant. I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about him that scared me." William stopped washing the plate in his hands and looked at me intently. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a shadow of doubt. "Margaret," he said in a very low voice, "there are things about James's death that I never told you." My heart began to pound so hard, I thought it might burst from my chest. William's words hit me like a lightning bolt. "What about James's death?" I asked with a trembling voice. William sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, the same table where we had shared thousands of family meals, where James used to do his homework, and where Lucas had always remained silent. William ran his hands over his face, as if he were trying to erase the memories that had tormented him for 25 years. "The night James died," he began in a broken voice. "Lucas wasn't in his room studying like he told us. I saw him leave the house around 8:00. I followed him because something about his attitude worried me. He'd been very strange those days, more aggressive, more resentful." William paused, looking at his hands as if the terrible truth he had kept for so long was written there. "I saw them arguing by the gorge," William continued. "Lucas and James were shouting horrible things at each other." My world began to spin. "What were they arguing about?" I whispered, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. William looked up and I saw tears in his eyes. Tears he hadn't even shed at our oldest son's funeral. "About the inheritance," he said softly. "Lucas was furious because James was the oldest, and according to family traditions, he would inherit most of our assets. But there was something more. Something about money that James had discovered." "What money?" I asked, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. William sighed deeply before continuing. 3 days before James died, he came to talk to me in the workshop. He had discovered that Lucas had been stealing money from our family savings account. Small amounts at first, but then larger sums. James had proof. He'd been investigating for months. My mind refused to process what I was hearing. My youngest son, the one who had been so attentive after James's death, the one who helped and cared for us, had been stealing from us since before his brother died. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I accused William, feeling the betrayal multiply twofold. Because when I got to the gorge that night, it was already too late. He replied in a choked voice. "I saw Lucas standing next to James's body." Our youngest son was trembling, crying, and repeating over and over, "It was an accident. It was an accident." He looked at me with those desperate eyes and begged me to help him. "Dad," he said. James tripped when he was trying to hit me. "I just defended myself and he lost his balance." Tears ran down my cheeks uncontrollably. "But you believed him," I murmured, even though I already knew the answer. William nodded slowly, with an expression of guilt that had been haunting him for decades. "He was my son, Margaret," he said, his voice trembling. "My youngest son was asking for my help, and James was already dead. I couldn't bring one back to life by destroying the other. I thought it was really an accident, that Lucas had learned his lesson, that he would become a better man after this." "And the stolen money?" I asked, needing to know every detail of this nightmare. Lucas promised me he would pay it back little by little, that he had taken the money to invest in a business that went wrong. He swore he would never do something like that again. And I believed him, Margaret. God forgive me, but I believed him because I needed to believe my son wasn't a killer. I got up from the table, stumbling and holding on to the wall to keep myself upright. Everything I had believed about my family, about my surviving son, about the last 25 years of my life, was a lie. "Did he pay the money back?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer from the look on William's face. "Never," he replied. "In fact, he kept stealing small amounts that I pretended not to notice, because confronting him would mean admitting I had covered up a murder. I became his accomplice, Margaret. Every time I stayed silent, every time I pretended not to see the bank accounts dwindle, I became more of his accomplice. The horrible reality began to take shape in my mind. That's why he's so interested in controlling our finances now," I murmured. "It's not because he cares about us. It's because he wants to finish what he started 25 years ago." William nodded gravely. "And there's something else, Margaret. Something I just discovered a few weeks ago." "What else could there be?" I asked, feeling like my heart couldn't take any more revelations. William went to his desk and pulled out some papers he had been hiding under other documents. "I've been discreetly investigating Lucas's finances. His carpentry business isn't doing as well as he wants us to believe. In fact, he's on the verge of bankruptcy. He owes more than $100,000 to several banks and suppliers." The papers trembled in my hands as I read the numbers. Lucas wasn't the successful man he pretended to be. He was a desperate failure who had been living on lies and stolen money for decades. "Does Ava know all this?" I asked, remembering her sweet smile and loving hugs. "I'm sure she does," William replied. "I've noticed how she directs the conversations when they talk about our money, how she asks specific questions about our savings, the value of the house, our life insurance policies. They aren't innocent questions, Margaret. They are questions from someone calculating exactly how much our death is worth." That sentence chilled me to the bone. "Our death?" I repeated in a whisper. It was the first time I had considered that Lucas might want to cause us physical harm. Until that moment, I thought he just wanted to rob or cheat us. But if he had killed his own brother for money, what would stop him from killing his parents for the same reason? "William," I said, grabbing his hands, "we have to go to the police. We have to tell them the truth about James and about what's happening now." But William shook his head with a look of hopelessness that broke my heart. "With what evidence, Margaret? I'm an accomplice to covering up a murder. If I talk now, I'll go to jail too." "And besides," William said, his voice tinged with exhaustion, "who's going to believe an old man of 65 who's been keeping this secret for 25 years? He was right, but were we really supposed to just wait for Lucas to kill us just like he did James? We have to be very careful," William said, trying to sound more confident than he really was. "We are going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence, to—" But his words were interrupted by the shrill ring of the phone. It was Lucas. "Hi, Mom," he said with that sweet voice that now sounded like a knife in my chest. "Ava and I were thinking, and we believe it would be beautiful to celebrate your 40th wedding anniversary with something special. How about we take you to those mountains you've always talked about next weekend? We could go on a family hike, take pictures, and have a perfect day together." My blood turned to ice. I looked at William, who had heard the conversation and had the same look of terror on his face. "That's a very sweet idea, son," I managed to reply in a trembling voice. "But let us think about it, and we'll get back to you tomorrow." After hanging up, William and I looked at each other in silence, knowing we had just received an invitation to our own execution. "The mountains," I murmured. "He's going to take us to the mountains to kill us and make it look like an accident," William nodded gravely, "just like he did with James at the gorge." That night, we didn't sleep a wink, holding each other in our bed, planning how we could save ourselves from our own son. The next few days were a nightmare of terror and pretense. William and I had to act as if nothing had happened when Lucas and Ava came to visit, smiling when they talked about the mountain trip, nodding when they excitedly told us they were going to spend time with family. But inside, every fiber of my being screamed with fear. I knew I was looking into the eyes of my oldest son's murderers, and that now they were planning to do the same to me and my husband. Ava arrived on Wednesday afternoon with a shopping bag, and that radiant smile that now seemed like the grimace of a demon. "Margaret, dear," she said, hugging me with those arms that would soon push me to my death. "I bought some supplies for our mountain adventure. Cookies, water, fruit, everything we'll need for the picnic." She showed me the contents of the bag as if she were an excited child. But I could only think about how each of those items could be used to cover up our murder. "I also brought my new camera," she added, pulling out an expensive digital camera. "I want to capture every moment of this special day. They're going to be photos we'll treasure forever." The irony of her words made me sick. The only photo she would take would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of some cliff if anyone ever found us. Lucas appeared behind her carrying a new-looking hiking backpack. "Dad," he said to William with feigned enthusiasm, I bought all the necessary equipment for a safe hike. Ropes, harnesses, lanterns, a first aid kit. Every word that came out of his mouth sounded like cruel mockery. Safety, equipment to plan our murders. The perversity of the situation made me dizzy. Isn't it a bit dangerous for people our age? I asked, trying to sound casual while looking for any excuse to cancel the trip. Ava stroked my cheek with that false tenderness that churned my stomach. That's why we chose a very easy and safe trail, she assured me. It's a hike even kids can do. Plus, Lucas and I will be there to take care of you the whole time. Yes, they would be there to take care of us until the exact moment they decided to push us off a cliff. That night, when they finally left, William and I sat in our living room, trembling, not just from the cold, but from the absolute terror we had been holding back for hours. "We can't go," I said, grabbing his hands. "We just can't. We'll make up some excuse." "If we don't go," William replied in a grave voice, "they'll find another way to kill us. Maybe something that looks even more accidental, like a house fire or a robbery gone wrong. At least in the mountains, we know what they're going to try to do." His words had a terrible logic, but they didn't comfort me at all. "So, what do you suggest?" I asked, desperate to find some solution that would save our lives. William was thoughtful for a few minutes before answering. "We're going to go, but we're going to be prepared. I'm going to hide my cell phone and set it to record everything that happens. If we manage to survive, we'll have evidence. And if we don't," his voice broke, "at least someone will know the truth." William was thoughtful for a few moments before answering. "We're going to go," he said slowly, "but we're going to be prepared. I'm going to hide my cell phone and set it to record everything that happens. If we survive, we'll have the evidence. And if we don't," his voice cracked, "at least someone will know the truth. That night we could barely touch our dinner. We both knew it might be our last meal together in this house, the same kitchen where we had shared so many happy memories, when we still thought we were a real family." William reviewed his will once more, making sure that if something happened to us, at least Lucas wouldn't get everything without some record of our suspicions. "I wrote a letter," he confessed, pulling a sealed envelope from his desk. "It's addressed to your sister, Clara. In it, I explain everything we know about James's death and what we believe Lucas plans to do to us. I've hidden it in the place where we keep our important documents. If we don't come back from this trip, at least she'll know where to look for the truth." That night, we went to bed holding each other, whispering words of love that might very well be our last. "If something happens to me, T," William said softly, "I want you to know that these 40 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite everything, despite the mistakes and the secrets, I love you more than my own life." I cried silently, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body, the smell of his skin, the thought of losing him, of never feeling his comforting presence again, tore at me like a jagged knife. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, mocking the storm inside my heart. Lucas arrived early, whistling a cheerful tune that made my blood freeze. "Morning, lovebirds," he called from the front door. "Ready for your big adventure?" Ava appeared behind him, radiant as a bride on her wedding day. Except this was a wedding to death. During breakfast, which we could barely eat, Lucas explained the route we would take in great detail. "It's a beautiful trail," he said, spreading a map on the table. "It leads to a lookout where you can see the entire valley. They say the views are spectacular." His eyes gleamed with a malicious enthusiasm. Of course, the views would be spectacular. For them, they would be the last we'd see in our lives. "The trail has some steep parts," Ava added, as if giving us useful tourist information, "but nothing that experienced hikers like you can't handle." Her comment about our supposed hiking abilities sounded like a cruel joke. We were two 60-year-olds who barely walked through the park once in a while. As we loaded the car, I saw Lucas meticulously checking his backpack, making sure he had everything he needed for his plan. I noticed ropes, a small shovel, and something that looked like a flare gun. "What's that for?" I asked, pointing to the gun. "For safety," he replied without missing a beat. "If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a distress signal." Of course, they would send a distress signal after pushing us off a cliff so our bodies could be found, confirming it was a tragic accident during a family hike. Everything was calculated. Every detail had been planned to make our murders look perfectly natural. The car ride to the mountains lasted 2 hours that felt like an eternity. Ava put on cheerful music and sang along with the songs as if we were really going on a fun family outing. Lucas drove carefully, obeying all the speed limits, stopping at every stop sign. He didn't want to risk an accident that might ruin his perfect plans. During the trip, William discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. "Everything that happens from here on out will be recorded," he whispered. "If we survive, we'll have proof. If not, at least the truth won't die with us." When we finally arrived at the trailhead, my heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would beat out of my chest. The place was beautiful with tall trees and the sound of a nearby river. But to me, it had become the setting for my own execution. Lucas and Ava took their backpacks out of the car, smiling and joking as if it were the happiest day of their lives. "Ready for the adventure?" Lucas asked, his voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. For the first time in 25 years, I saw the same cold glint in Lucas's eyes that he'd had the night he betrayed James. We had been hiking for what felt like an eternity, the trails starting off easy, winding between tall trees and moss-covered rocks. Ava walked ahead of us, her camera constantly clicking, her voice sweet as she commented on the beauty of the landscape. "Look at those wildflowers," she exclaimed, pointing toward bushes full of yellow blossoms and a brightly colored bird. Her performance was flawless, like a loving daughter-in-law enjoying a special day with her in-laws. But there was a darkness behind her eyes that I couldn't ignore. Lucas followed behind us, pretending to watch our pace, but I could feel his eyes on our backs, like daggers piercing through the air. Every time I turned to look at him, he offered that grin, the same grin that had concealed his lies for decades. "How are you doing, Mom and Dad?" he asked with feigned concern. "Need to stop and rest?" His voice was syrupy sweet, but every word made my skin crawl. After an hour of hiking, we began to climb a steeper part of the trail. My legs already felt heavy, and William was struggling to keep his breathing steady. We weren't used to this kind of exercise, and Lucas and Ava knew it perfectly. They had chosen a route that would wear us down physically, preparing us for when the time would come to execute their plan. "We're almost at the lookout," Ava announced, her voice a little too cheerful. But according to the map I had seen at home, we still had at least another hour of hiking ahead. Her lie confirmed what I had feared. They had no intention of reaching the real lookout. The place where they planned to kill us had to be much closer. As we hiked, I focused on memorizing every detail of the trail. The way the trees formed a canopy above, the curve of the rocks, the way the moss felt beneath my feet. Every part of this path could be vital if I managed to survive and needed to explain to the police where everything happened. William was doing the same, and occasionally, we exchanged glances loaded with terror and determination. We knew we were walking toward our deaths, but we also knew it was our only chance to get evidence against Lucas and Ava. "Oh, look at that!" Ava suddenly shouted, pointing to a rock formation to our right. "That cliff has an incredible view. Why don't we climb up there to take some special photos?" My blood ran cold. There it was, the place they had chosen for our murder. The cliff rose about 90 feet above the main trail, accessible by a narrow, treacherous path that seemed much more dangerous than the one we had been following. The rocks were loose, the footing uncertain, and there were fewer trees to grab onto if we stumbled. And from the top, the cliff dropped into a deep gorge, jagged rocks protruding from the depths, waiting to consume anything that fell. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said, trying to sound casual. "That trail looks pretty dangerous for people our age." But Lucas had already started walking toward the turnoff, carrying his backpack full of safety equipment that I knew he wouldn't use to save us. "Come on, Mom," he said, using the same voice he'd used when he was a child, trying to convince me of something. "It'll only take a few minutes. Besides, Ava's right. The photos from up there are going to be spectacular." The way he said spectacular made me tremble. They would be spectacular, all right, for whoever found those photos after we were gone. Evidence of a tragic accident. William squeezed my hand discreetly, reminding me that his phone was recording everything. We had to go on. We had to keep moving, no matter how much my body screamed for rest. If we refused now, they would just find another way, another excuse to kill us. The climb to the cliff was exhausting. Loose rocks slid under our feet, and more than once I nearly lost my balance. But the most terrifying realization was how perfect this place was for murder. If someone accidentally tripped and fell from the top, there would be no way to survive the drop. And most importantly, there would be no witnesses. "Almost there," Ava shouted from above, where she had already reached the top with the agility of someone who had planned the route carefully. Lucas followed Ava, and then helped William and me complete the last few feet of the climb. His hands on my arms felt like the claws of a vulture, cold and unrelenting. The lookout was indeed spectacular. From there you could see the entire valley, the mountains stretching far in the distance, and the river snaking through the trees. In any other circumstance, it would have been a beautiful moment to share with family. But knowing what I knew, the place now felt like the perfect setting for a nightmare. "Come over here for the photos!" Ava shouted, positioning herself near the edge of the cliff. "I want the valley to be in the background." William and I approached slowly, each step bringing us closer to our final destination. I could see Lucas strategically positioning himself behind us, his eyes calculating angles, measuring distances. "Perfect!" Ava exclaimed, raising her camera. "Now hug each other and smile." William and I hugged, probably for the last time, while she snapped picture after picture. Each flash of the camera felt like a lightning bolt, heralding the storm that was about to come. "Take one more," Lucas suggested, moving closer to us. "But this time, stand back a little so the landscape looks better." One step back meant standing right on the edge of the precipice. William and I exchanged a glance. The time had come. We moved back as we were told, feeling the solid ground begin to disappear beneath our feet, leaving only the emptiness of the abyss behind us. Ava raised the camera one more time, but this time, I saw something different in her eyes. The mask had fallen. There was no longer any need to pretend. "Smile," she said in a voice that was no longer sweet at all. "This is going to be your last photo." At that moment, Lucas lunged toward us with his arms outstretched. The plan was simple. Push us backward so we'd fall into the void, snap some photos of the accident, and then go down to discover our broken bodies. But William had been preparing for this moment. In the last second, he managed to grab Lucas's wrist and pull him forward. "If we're going to die, you're coming with us," William shouted with a fury I had never seen in him before. For a moment, all four of us teetered on the edge of the cliff, holding on to each other in a macabre dance between life and death. Ava screamed and tried to help Lucas, but the weight of all of us was too much. I felt the ground give way beneath me, felt gravity begin to win the battle. Then the four of us fell together, locked in a deadly embrace, screaming as the air rushed around us, and the rocky ground approached at breakneck speed. In those seconds that seemed to last an eternity, I thought of James, of how he must have felt when Lucas pushed him into the gorge 25 years ago. The impact was brutal. I heard the horrible sound of bones cracking, the sound of my own body shattering against the rocks. The pain was indescribable, but even more terrible was the taste of blood in my mouth, and the certainty that this time, Lucas had won. This time there would be no witnesses to tell the truth. But then I heard William's voice, weak but clear. "Margaret, don't move. Play dead." And I realized something incredible. I was still alive. The pain was so intense I thought I might go mad. Every fiber of my body screamed in agony. I felt blood running down my face, and something wet and sticky soaking my clothes. But William's voice echoed in my ears like a divine command. "Play dead." With a willpower I didn't know I had, I remained completely still, controlling even my breathing so it would be imperceptible. A few feet away, I could hear the moans of pain from Lucas and Ava. They had also survived the fall. But from their groans, they seemed to be in worse condition than we were. "Ava," I heard Lucas's broken voice. "Are you okay?" His concern for his wife made my stomach churn. This man, who had murdered his own brother and tried to kill us, was still capable of feeling love for someone. "I think I broke my leg," Ava moaned. "It hurt so much. And what about the old people?" Lucas muttered. His disrespectful way of referring to us confirmed what I already knew. We had never been family to her. We were just obstacles on her way to our money. I heard movement as if Lucas were crawling toward us. My heart was racing, and I feared Lucas would hear it. "They're dead," he announced after several minutes that felt like a lifetime. "Both of them have their eyes open, but they're not breathing." His lie filled me with a strange sense of hope. If he believed we were dead, maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. Perfect. Ava whispered with satisfaction that chilled my blood. It worked just like we planned. Well, except for the part where we fell too. I heard her bitter laugh. At least we won't have to pretend we love them anymore. For the next few minutes, which seemed to stretch into an eternity, Lucas and Ava discussed their situation. Both were injured but could still move. The plan now was to crawl until they found a place from which they could call for help, and then spin the tale of how they miraculously survived a tragic accident that had killed their poor grandparents. "Remember the story," Lucas said to Ava. "We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He tripped, and trying to grab on, he pulled Mom with him. We tried to help, but we fell too. It's important that our stories match," he added, his voice low but steady. "I know," Ava replied. "We've practiced this 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor us. We lost our dear in-laws in a horrible accident." Her performance was so convincing. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her every word. Gradually, their voices began to fade as they crawled toward what they hoped would be their salvation. When silence finally fell, William whispered my name so low I could barely hear it. "Margaret, are you okay?" I answered in the same whisper, confirming that I was alive, but terribly injured. "My left leg is broken," he told me. His voice choked with pain. "I think I have a few fractured ribs. What about you?" I mentally assessed my body. A stabbing pain shot through my right arm. My head throbbed like a drum, and my shoulder felt wrong. But I was alive, and that was more than I had dared hope for. "We're bad, but we're alive," I whispered. "It works, but there's no signal down here." That was the most terrifying part of our situation. We were alive, but trapped at the bottom of a gorge, injured, and unable to communicate with the outside world. If no one came looking for us, we would die here slowly, from thirst, hunger, or our wounds. "William," I whispered, "before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything that really happened the night James died." My husband sighed deeply, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 25 years. "That night," he began, his voice trembling, "James came to find me in the workshop. He was furious. He had papers in his hands, bank statements." He paused, his face contorting as the weight of the past crushed him. He showed me evidence that Lucas had been stealing money from our accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. James had been investigating because he'd noticed discrepancies in our savings. The physical pain mingled with the emotional torment as I processed the truth that had been hidden for so long. James wanted to confront Lucas that same night, William continued. I tried to calm him down, to convince him to wait until the next day, but he was determined. He said he couldn't sleep knowing his younger brother was stealing from us. And you followed him? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I followed him because I was afraid of what might happen. I knew James's temper when he got angry, and I had noticed something strange about Lucas lately, a coldness that sent shivers down my spine. When I got to the gorge, William said, his voice breaking, I found them screaming at each other. James had the papers in his hand, waving them in Lucas's face. You're a thief, he yelled. You're stealing from our own parents. Lucas denied everything. He said James was crazy, that he was making things up. My heart raced as I imagined the scene. My two sons, facing off in the dark, one accusing the other of betrayal. What happened next? I whispered, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. William paused for a long time before continuing. He told Lucas that if he didn't return the money and confess everything to us, he would tell us the truth himself. Lucas went berserk. He yelled that James had always been the favorite, that he had always had everything easy, that it was time for things to change. And then William's voice broke. Lucas pushed James. It wasn't an accident, he whispered. He pushed him with all his strength, deliberately. I saw James trying to keep his balance, saw his arms flailing desperately, looking for something to grab onto. But it was too late. Tears streamed down my cheeks, mixing with the blood from my wounds. Why didn't you tell me the truth? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. William sighed deeply, because when I got to where Lucas was, he was crying, trembling, telling me over and over that it had been an accident, that he hadn't meant to do it. He begged me not to tell you anything, that he couldn't lose you too. My heart raced in my chest, knowing that Lucas would surely hear it. They're dead, he announced after what felt like hours of silence. Both of them have their eyes open, but they're not breathing. His lie filled me with a strange, unsettling hope. If he thought we were dead, then maybe there was still a chance. Perhaps we could outsmart him yet. Perfect, Ava whispered, the satisfaction in her voice so chilling it froze my blood. It worked just like we planned. Except for the part where Lucas and Ava fell with us. I heard her bitter laugh echo in the silence. At least now we won't have to pretend we love them anymore. For what seemed like an eternity, Lucas and Ava discussed their next move, crawling on the jagged rocks, their injuries barely slowing them down. They had planned for this moment, their so-called survival story. They would crawl until they found a place to call for help, where they would spin a tale about their miraculous escape from a family tragedy, painting themselves as the only victims of the day. Lucas was clear. Remember the story, he said to Ava, his voice thick with calculation. We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He tripped, and when he tried to grab on, Mom went with him. We tried to help, but we fell too. We need to make sure our stories match, he added, his tone insistent. I know, Ava replied too casually. We've rehearsed this 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors. Poor us. We lost our dear in-laws in a horrible accident. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed every word. As their voices faded, the silence around me grew heavy, suffocating. When it finally broke, William whispered my name, low and shaky. Margaret, are you okay? I nodded faintly, though the agony in my body was unbearable. My left leg's broken, he whispered, his voice strained with pain. And I think I have some fractured ribs. What about you? My body ached as I processed the damage. My right arm was on fire with pain, my head pounding as if someone had struck me with a hammer. But somehow I was alive, and for that I was thankful. We're bad, but we're alive," I whispered, forcing a grin. But there was one terrifying fact still looming over us. We were alive, but trapped, unable to communicate with the outside world. No one knew we were here. If no one came looking for us, we would die slowly, our wounds the least of our worries. "William," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything about the night James died." William exhaled deeply, the weight of his words pressing down on him like an anchor. He spoke slowly, as if reliving the pain he had kept hidden for years. "That night, James came to find me in the workshop. He was furious, holding papers in his hands, bank statements." He paused again, his voice trembling. He showed me evidence that Lucas had been stealing from our accounts for months. At first, it was small amounts, but then it escalated. My stomach churned, and the pain in my body seemed to pale in comparison to the betrayal William had just revealed. James had been investigating, noticing discrepancies in our savings. He continued, his voice barely above a whisper. He said he couldn't stand by and let Lucas ruin everything we'd built. But Lucas denied it all. He said James was being paranoid. What happened next? I barely managed to ask, fearing the answer. William's expression grew dark. James wanted to confront Lucas that night, but I tried to stop him. I begged him to wait until the morning, but he was too determined. He couldn't live with the idea that his brother was stealing from us. I knew James's temper, but Lucas had been different for a while. He was colder, more distant. Something about him. It didn't sit right with me. I followed them when James left the house. William paused, his hands shaking as the truth finally spilled out. I saw them arguing by the gorge. James had the papers in his hand, yelling at Lucas. "You're a thief!" he screamed. "You're stealing from our own family." I thought he'd stop. William continued, his voice cracking. But Lucas lost it. He pushed James. I was frozen in horror. "It wasn't an accident," William said softly. He pushed him. "It was deliberate. I could hardly breathe." The guilt of it all seemed to weigh heavier than the injuries I sustained from the fall. "But why didn't you tell me the truth earlier?" I managed to choke out. William sighed deeply, and I saw the regret in his eyes. Because when I got to Lucas, he was crying. He was begging me, saying it was an accident. He begged me not to tell you. He said he couldn't lose me too, that he'd made a mistake. The paramedics were focused on keeping William stable, their movements frantic as they worked. From their hurried conversations, I understood that his condition was far worse than mine. For a brief moment, I feared he might not survive long enough for us to expose the truth. "Ma'am," I heard one of the paramedics say softly, his voice laced with genuine compassion. "If you can hear me, hold on. We'll be at the hospital in a few minutes." His kindness was a stark contrast to the cold manipulation I had been subjected to by my own family. Ava and Lucas had painted such an insidious portrait of love, pretending to be the grieving relatives, while in reality, they were the architects of our doom. As we arrived at the hospital, chaos erupted. Doctors and nurses rushed past, their frantic orders creating an almost surreal atmosphere. I was whisked into the emergency room where the medical staff began working on my injuries. I kept my eyes shut, breathing shallowly, pretending to be unconscious, but every muscle in my body screamed to open my eyes and beg for help. I had to find someone I could trust, someone who might listen and believe the truth. "Doctor," I heard a nurse murmur urgently. "Her vital signs are strange. Her pulse is stronger than we'd expect for someone in her condition." My heart skipped a beat. They had discovered me. My body had betrayed me. I wasn't pretending well enough, and now the risk of our plan failing had never been higher. The doctor spoke softly, almost as if to himself. "It happens sometimes in cases of extreme trauma. The body has mysterious ways of clinging to life. Let's keep a close eye on her. The next few hours will be crucial." Ava's sobs echoed in the background, though they didn't feel genuine. If anything, they sounded more like a sigh of relief. She thought we were dead, but she hadn't counted on me being alive. Can we see them? Lucas asked, his voice breaking with fake grief. Just for a few minutes, the doctor replied, and I could hear his measured footsteps approaching my bed. This was it, the most dangerous moment of all. I had to convince Lucas that I was still fading in and out of consciousness. He was here now, and I had to make him believe I was at death's door. I felt Lucas's hand on mine, and it took everything in me not to pull away, to scream, to tell the world what he had done. Mom, he whispered, his breath close to my ear. If you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. I'm so sorry this happened. His words were sweet on the surface, but they felt like poison sinking into my veins. You're a liar, I thought, though I couldn't say it aloud. Ava leaned over from the other side, her voice oozing false tenderness as she whispered, Margaret, dear, you've been like a mother to me. We'll never forget you. My heart twisted with the bitter knowledge that their grief was fake, that their love was a lie meant to manipulate me, to secure their future without consequence. But then, Lucas leaned closer, his breath cold against my ear. I hope you've learned your lesson, Mom, he whispered. You should never have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried, just like James. At that moment, I knew the plan had worked. Lucas had just confessed. Even though I couldn't record it, I knew Ella, the nurse, had overheard every word. The confession had been made, and though I had no way of proving it right now, I could sense that Ella understood the implications of what had just been said. What did you say about James? Ava asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Lucas froze. Nothing, he muttered. A lie he knew wasn't convincing. I just meant, well, Mom always wondered what really happened that night. I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But Ava wasn't fooled. Lucas, she snapped, let's go. The doctors need space to work. I could feel the tension between them, the realization that they had said too much in the wrong place. After they left, I felt Ella's presence near my bed. She leaned down so that her voice was barely above a whisper. Ma'am, I know you can hear me. What I just overheard? It's not normal. If you're in danger, you need to tell me somehow. Ella whispered, her voice full of urgency. For a brief moment, a sliver of hope pierced through my fear. Someone else had started to suspect. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I moved my index finger. It was the tiniest movement, but Ella noticed immediately. Oh my God, she whispered in disbelief. She's pretending to be unconscious. I moved my finger again, just twice this time. Yes, listen, she said, leaning closer to me. I'm going to pretend to check your monitors. If you're in danger from those people who were just here, move your finger 3 times. Without hesitation, I moved my finger 3 times, one after another. Ella gasped, her eyes wide with realization. They did this to you. 3 more subtle movements. Ella stepped away from my bed, pretending to check my IV while she processed what she had just uncovered. I could see her struggling in her expression, torn between doing the right thing and what would happen if she acted. Finally, she leaned back toward me. I'm going to talk to the doctor in charge, she whispered urgently. But you need to keep pretending until we can protect you. Do you understand? I managed to move my finger once. The minutes stretched on, agonizing and silent. Ella left the room, and I was left alone with my racing heart. I could only pray that she believed my story and would do the right thing. The wait felt endless, my body aching in the stillness. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Ella, accompanied by an older man, who I assumed was the chief doctor, and 2 police officers. The sight of them gave me a moment of relief. Ma'am, the doctor said in a low, comforting voice. Ella told me about your situation. If you can hear me, you're safe now. The officers are here to protect you. The words were a balm to my fractured spirit, but the panic that had gripped me still held fast. Can you open your eyes? One of the officers asked gently, his voice steady. Slowly, I forced my eyes open. the blinding hospital light assaulting my senses. But gradually I managed to focus on their worried faces. "Thank God," Ella murmured softly, relief flooding her voice. I thought I was going crazy. "Ma'am," said the police officer, a middle-aged man with a hard expression. "I'm Detective Parker. We understand you're in a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what really happened on that mountain?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper, the pain from both my injuries, and the weight of the truth making it hard to speak. "My son Lucas and his wife Ava pushed us." The room seemed to hold its breath. The next few hours were a whirlwind of statements, recordings, and revelations. I recounted everything I knew. James's death, Lucas's thefts, the pressure to change our will, and finally, the plan to murder us on the mountain. But the most crucial piece of evidence was William's phone. "Your husband has recorded evidence?" Detective Parker asked, his eyes sharp with focus. "Yes," I whispered. "Everything is on his phone. The confessions, the plans, everything." The detective immediately left to see William, who had regained consciousness an hour after me. When Parker explained the situation, William handed over the phone without hesitation. "Here's everything," he said in a weak yet firm voice. 2 years of lies and the truth about what happened today. While the police technicians analyzed the recording, Lucas and Ava remained in the waiting room, playing the roles of devastated family members, greeting other visitors and receiving condolences for our supposed deaths. They had no idea their carefully crafted performance was about to collapse. "The recording is clear," the detective announced after about an hour. "We have explicit confessions about James's murder, admissions about stealing money, and direct evidence of premeditated attempted murder against you two. It's more than enough to arrest them." "But are you going to arrest them here?" I asked, worried about the immediate danger we were still in. "If they realize we're alive and talking," Detective Parker nodded solemnly. "We already have officers in position. As soon as we have the arrest warrant signed, we'll take them in. In the meantime, you are both under police protection." The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Lucas and Ava were downstairs, likely planning how to handle our funeral and inheritance, still blissfully unaware that their world of lies was crumbling. They were playing the victims while the truth was now our weapon. "Is there anything else?" Detective Parker asked, pulling out a folder of papers. "After hearing your story, we investigated your son's finances. Not only is he bankrupt, as you suspected, but he also owes money to some very dangerous people, unofficial lenders who don't take excuses." My blood ran cold. "You mean we weren't just obstacles to him?" I asked, feeling a rush of betrayal and disbelief. Detective Parker confirmed it. "He saw you as his only chance at survival. With your inheritance, he could pay off his debts and start over. Without you, he likely would have ended up dead in a few weeks." The depth of the betrayal settled over me like a heavy weight. Lucas hadn't just seen us as obstacles. Our death was necessary for his survival. It wasn't just convenient, it was crucial. "And what about our grandchildren?" I asked, my heart aching at the thought of Lucas and Ava's innocent children. "Social services will take temporary custody," Parker replied gently. "But you could apply for custody once you're able to recover from your injuries." The idea of raising the children of our murderers was overwhelming, but it was the only way I could ensure that some good could come from this nightmare. Those children didn't deserve to be caught up in the sins of their parents. They deserved a chance to grow up in a home where love was real, not feigned. "It's time," Detective Parker announced, as an officer entered the room with a stack of papers. "The warrants are signed. We're going to arrest them now." Through the hospital room window, I could see police officers discreetly positioning themselves. The moment I'd been waiting for 25 long years, was finally here. "Lucas Black and Ava Black." I heard the officer in charge's firm voice. "You are under arrest for the murder of James Black and the attempted murder of Margaret and William Black." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by Ava's hysterical scream. "What are you talking about? We're the victims here. Our in-laws died in an accident." "Ma'am," the officer replied calmly, "your in-laws are alive, and they've provided complete evidence of your crimes." There was a long, horrified silence before Lucas's voice cracked with desperation. "That's impossible! We saw them die! They were dead!" His involuntary confession was captured by the police recorders, adding yet another piece of evidence against them. Through the radio, I could hear Ava blaming Lucas. "It was all his idea. I didn't want to do any of this. He forced me." And in a flash of panic, Lucas screamed, "You were the one who suggested the cliff. You planned this all." Within moments, the alliance they'd built over the years began to disintegrate, each of them trying to save themselves. An hour later, Detective Parker returned to my room, his expression a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. "They're arrested and on their way to the station," he informed me. "They're both trying to blame each other, which only strengthens our case. But there's something else I need to tell you." "What else?" I asked, unsure how much more I could take. "During the arrest, we found this in your son's backpack," he said, pulling out a small digital recorder. "Apparently, he had been recording his conversations with you and your husband over the past few weeks, likely looking for evidence that you suspected something." My blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means he knew you were starting to discover the truth. The trip to the mountain wasn't spontaneous. It was a direct response to your suspicions," Detective Parker continued. "In one of the recordings, you can clearly hear Ava telling him, 'We have to act fast before they go to the police.' The depth of their planning, the coldness of their calculation took my breath away. They hadn't just planned to kill us. They had been monitoring our every move, evaluating the level of danger we posed to them. We were mice in a maze, and they were the scientists watching our every step." "There's something else," the detective added, a grim tone in his voice. "In the investigation of Lucas's finances, we found out that not only is he bankrupt, but he's also been forging your signatures on several documents, trying to access your bank accounts." I felt the final dagger plunge into my heart. If we had died on that mountain, Lucas would have had immediate access to everything. Our money, our assets, all those years of hard work, all of William's sacrifices, would have gone directly to him. "How much money did he steal?" I asked, my voice trembling with the weight of this revelation. "About $50,000 over the last 5 years, Detective Parker replied. "Small amounts at first that he thought you wouldn't notice, but when added up, it's a significant sum. That money, the savings William and I had built over decades, had been funding Lucas's life of luxury while he planned our deaths." The irony was bitter. The next days in the hospital were a blur of police interviews, lawyer visits, and relentless calls from the media. The local press had already dubbed the case the most horrible family betrayal of the decade. Reporters from all over the country wanted to hear our side of the story, and through it all, Lucas and Ava remained unaware of how their world of lies was about to be shattered forever. Clara arrived from the neighboring town, her eyes swollen from crying as she enveloped me in a hug, as if we hadn't seen each other in years. "Margaret," she repeated over and over. I always knew something was wrong with Lucas after James died, but I never imagined he was capable of this. Her words brought some comfort, confirming that my maternal instincts hadn't been entirely blind. "And the kids?" I asked, thinking of Lucas and Ava's children, now in the temporary care of social services. "I saw them yesterday," Clara replied, her voice laced with sadness. "They're confused, asking why their parents can't come home. They're too young to understand the horror of what really happened. Our lawyer, Daniel, the same one who had helped us with our will, came to visit with an update. The case is strong," he reassured us. With the recordings, the confessions during the arrest, and all the financial evidence, it's almost impossible for them to avoid the significant charges. But then Daniel added something that made my blood run cold. However, they're trying to negotiate a plea deal, claiming it was a crime of passion, not premeditated. A crime of passion? I asked, indignation seeping into my voice. They planned this for weeks, bought special equipment, chose the perfect place. Daniel nodded gravely. I know, we have evidence of premeditation, but their lawyers are pushing the narrative that it was a desperate act driven by extreme financial pressure. The thought that they might receive a reduced sentence for their crimes filled me with rage. They had killed James. They had tried to kill William and me. They had stolen from us for years, and now they wanted to be seen as victims of circumstance. What can we do to make sure they get what they deserve? I asked, desperate for justice. Testify, Daniel replied simply. Your testimony, combined with all the evidence, will be crucial to helping the jury understand the full scope of these crimes. But be warned, it's going to be emotionally devastating to face Lucas in court. He was right. The thought of facing Lucas, of having to look him in the eye as he sat there, pretending to be the son I once knew, was overwhelming. But for James, for us, and for the grandchildren who deserved to know the truth about their parents, I knew what I had to do. 3 weeks after the arrest, William and I were finally allowed to go home. Our bodies had healed enough for us to move, though William still needed crutches, and I had my arm in a sling. The house felt empty, like a set after the play's over. Everything left as it was when we'd gone on that fateful outing. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. The bed was unmade. The flowers Lucas had bought me that week were still on the kitchen table, now withered and dead. It was as if time had stopped the moment our normal lives were shattered. Do you think we'll ever be happy again? I asked William that first night back as we lay in our bed. He wrapped his uninjured arm around me and sighed deeply. I don't know, Margaret, he said, but we're alive. We have the truth on our side. And for the first time in 25 years, we don't have to live with secrets. The trial began 6 months later. On the day I had to testify, I looked Lucas in the eye for the first time since the arrest. He showed no remorse, no pain. The son I had raised was gone. In his place was a cold, calculating stranger, a monster disguised as my child. When I finished my testimony, recounting every excruciating detail of our experience, I looked directly at Lucas from the witness stand. Lucas, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I don't know who you are anymore, but you are no longer my son. My son died the night you killed James. What's been living in his place for the last 25 years is a monster that I unwittingly helped raise. The jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Lucas guilty of first-degree murder for James's death and first-degree attempted murder for what he had done to us. Ava received the same conviction as an accomplice. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A year later, William and I began the process of formally adopting our grandchildren. They were beautiful, innocent children who deserved a chance to grow up with real love, not the toxic manipulation they had experienced from their biological parents. Every night when I tuck them in, I tell them about their Uncle James, the brother they never knew. I tell them about his kindness, his honesty, and his dream of giving them a safe, loving home. I promise them that no matter what, they will never have to feel the betrayal that we did.